was. I mean, before the dictatorship, they had the Senate, and that's what the government currently looked at, and they said, okay, there used to be a Senate before there was a dictatorship, and then you had the military. So what we're going to do is we're going to give executive power to the president and give him the power of the military to say he can say where the military goes. No one needs to question him when it comes to the military. He is the commander in chief. That's why the commander in chief, the president, the whole military responds. The utmost supreme person that they respond to when taking orders comes from the president, who's the commander in chief. Now, because he has all of that power, if he wants to use executive power for specific things, he can. But if it has to do, if this decision has anything to do with the American people, it has to go through the Senate. And in the Senate, if the president wants to say, you know what, okay, tomorrow I'm going to put in a third day, this holiday or that holiday, or I'm going to let's do this, or whatever the case may be for the country, not just New York or not just Virginia, but for the country as a whole, right? That has to be approved they have to have 3/4 vote. So 3 out of 4 has to say yes, and then the law becomes, and then the bill becomes a law. So they introduce a bill. The president may introduce a bill and say, okay, this and this and that, and then on the third level, you have the judicial, which is the Supreme Court, which says, okay, this is a law and this is not a law, and you're right and you're wrong, and the president, you fucked up, and you know what I'm saying? So you have, and then the Supreme Court can also look at, all of the laws and the bylaws, and that's why they say, okay, this is actually, they sign off on it and say it becomes a law. So you not one person has all of the power. That's why they have it like that. The president can't just say, okay, we're going to do this, and everybody's going to. No, it doesn't work that way because it's not a dictatorship. So that's why if a whole bunch of people say, you know what, we should do this, and the president says yes, let's do loan forgiveness. Everybody that is interested, everybody that's involved in it'll be to their best interest, whatever for whatever reason their cause is. And then the president will then say yes, he signs off on it, and then the Senate will vote on it.
Okay, so again, how did the loan forgiveness, which was the president's, he ran on this ticket.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So how is it that obviously, the American voters who did vote for him with that in mind, once he became president, he is unable to get it through, as you mentioned, the House well enough, to the Senate well enough to where it does not even have to go to the Supreme Court, right?
Right.
So how did it not go in that direction? Instead, it was like Supreme Court shot it down. How did it get there that quickly? That's the question that, Brothers Incorporated brothers want to know.
Because that's the way the Constitution is set. That's the way the Constitution is set up. I just explained to you.
Okay, let's back up a minute. Because now that you mentioned, because you brought up Constitution,
Mm-hmm. That's the fathers of
the founding fathers. Okay, very good. I'm glad you brought that up because this was the second point. Is America a Christian country? United States of America, particularly, is it a Christian nation?
They separate the state with the church. There's yes and no. From my experience, they will say there's this, church state is separate, but a lot of Americans, and a lot of politicians, people in the government will identify as being Catholic or Christian.
Okay, so does that mean that as they identify, they actually are necessarily is another subject in itself? But again, the question is the nation itself. In other words,
The nation?
yes, the nation.
No, the nation doesn't. No, as a nation, they don't. You know how Saudi Arabia says, this is Islamic State. The Islamic State. The Emirates. Oh no.
Okay. So what exactly is it? Just a state based off of a founding father's constitution?
Just the Constitution of the United States of America. That's it. And that's it. If it's in the Constitution, and there's no church in the Constitution. There's none of that. It's just
okay. So there is no religion in the Constitution, basically. It does not say that we're going to create laws based on, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, whatever, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever, right?
Yes.
Okay, very well. In terms of the ideologies or the basis of the Constitution was necessarily what? What was the purpose of the Constitution? To create a body of people that would just make up laws as they went along, or what?
Well, you have to understand that time. During that time, they were under the British rule, and so the Constitution, they got their freedom, whatever, right? Civil War. Not Civil War.
The War of Independence?
That one.
Yes, we're familiar, we did, some extensive on George Washington and, the like of this one, Colonel Green. We remember, yes, those. But go ahead. So...
Yeah, if you look at the Constitution...
But I guess, okay, so... right.
The Constitution is and it's really, really hard to understand the mindset, but I think it...
And that's what we're... Just give me a minute. There's 1 second. I need to ask you something very crucial. The people who wrote the Constitution wrote it while slavery was going on, correct?
Yes.
During which time they, as you mentioned, were fighting the British colonialists, correct?
Yes.
They fought the British, or I should say, we fought the British. We're all, American here. At the end of the day, we don't carry any other citizenship. People need to go and study the Boysyi of the United States. But anyway, we fought the British for how many years? 8 years, correct?
It was about 8, yeah.
After which point, the Constitution was not changed. In other words, it's not to say that, let's put it this way, slavery continued on.
Yes.
Okay. Under the same, give me a minute, under the same Constitution. Correct?
I don't think that African Americans were considered when the Constitution was drafted.
Okay, can you repeat that one more time, please?
African Americans were not considered. Were not in the thought in the mindset. They weren't considered when the Constitution was being created.
Okay. So from what I'm understanding and what you're saying is that this Constitution that we have today is the same Constitution that dates back to the days of revolution, colonializing, or revolution against the British. The war, it led to the War of Independence, and this constitution remained after the War of Independence. Although you had the slave trade ongoing in the United States at that time, correct?
Wait, no. The Constitution was written after the War of Independence, not before.
So the Constitution is written after the War of Independence. You still have slavery going on, correct?
Yeah.
Very good. And as you mentioned earlier, when the Constitution was being written, Afro-Americans, if you may, or African-American, if you may,
You say slaves.
slaves were considered as nothing. In other words, they were not included in this Constitution, correct?
They weren't included.
So why are we following the same Constitution is my question. You haven't modified the Constitution. The Constitution, is set in stone. It's clear. So why hasn't this Constitution been, to include African Americans? And by the way, of course, we're getting to the point of how much, every, urban Afro-American should be, compensated, because of the years of slavery and post-slavery as well. Because you're talking about an injustice, and you're talking about a very serious crime against humanity. But we will get to that. But for now, you are going to say something about the Constitution.
Even though they weren't included, considered, mentioned, but not even thought of as being part of the human race at the time the Constitution was written. And I'm not saying that this I'm not saying this is an excuse, but the way the Constitution is written, it doesn't disclude any race or people.
Very well. Let's come to term about something here. You have the greatest nation today.
I'm not defending it.
No, it's okay. Let's have this. Let's come to.
I just want to be clear. Can I just be clear? I'm not defending that. I'm just saying that because of how shitty humans are, they will look at that one particular thing and just say, okay, well, since it doesn't disclude anyone, then it means all people. But it's not that. It's not. I'm just saying. Let me just be clear that because of how shitty humans are, they will look at that, meaning the powers that be will look at it, so the Senate and the House or whomever powers be, the president, they will look at that and they would just say the Constitution is not going to be rewritten because it's the way it is.
Let's move on to a secondary topic, which is taxes. Okay, can you explain?
If you use that argument, I'm telling you, if you use that argument, that's what it's going to come down to.
It's okay. There's not, we're not doing practically anything other than Jalla Jalaluhu's means. But let me ask you something about taxes. Can you explain why it is that we are taxed so much that we do not even know how much we've been taxed? For example, excuse me. Taxes. Because if I make $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000, I'm already taxed off of that, correct?
Yeah, if taxes, what is the percentage of taxes? What is it, 8% now?
I believe so.
Yeah, so you make $1,000, what is 8%? 80 bucks?
Correct. So let's say,
right?
That is correct. But let's say again, think about it. You took the 8% off of the income initially, right?
No, that's the combined amount because you have Social Security, and it depends on what state you live in too. What's coming out?
Okay. Let's get by that. Let's say taxes, Social Security, federal tax, whatever. All of this came out.
Federal taxes, local taxes, Social Security,
Correct.
and I think there's another tax
Yeah.
here and there.
Right. Okay. So you took all these taxes out, and it amounts to, it does amount to a whole lot more than $80 on $1,000. But we'll let that fly. We'll let those who. The point of the matter is, when I take home my, excuse me, when I take home my gross, and I start spending it on things like bills, okay, like electricity, like water, like cellular phone, a home phone. Some people may even have faxes. My rent, you understand? Food, gasoline, which I need for transportation. You tax me on every single thing. Can you explain how that is? In other words, what is really the difference between that and slavery that you actually have back in the time prior to the Constitution? In other words, it almost appears that your Constitution has not given me equality, has not given me the equality that it actually gave.
No, here's the catcher. It's not just black people that are in this predicament. It's the whole fucking human race of humans that are in this predicament that are subservient.
So no, I'm definitely not, arguing with that point. But what I'm asking, what I want to know, I just wanted to throw in there with the Constitution, but I moved from the Constitution. I want to know about the taxes. Why do they have to charge tax in every single thing? Internet tax, grocery tax, meal, this. What is this sales tax thing about? Why?
Sales tax.
I mean, they're making it off of the backs of the destitute, the poor. People who are rich, like Elon Musk, like Jeff Bezos, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates. Wait a minute, let me explain something. It's already known.
The devil's advocate. Hold on. I want to play devil's advocate. Can I do that?
Shh, go ahead, Iblisis. As normal. Go ahead.
Okay. So, do you know these welfare programs? Who do you think pays for these welfare programs?
Okay, first of all,
who do you think? Do you want to build roads and bridges? I hear you talk about these Pocahontas bridges. Who do you think build? Where do you think the money came from? For that sales tax, internet tax, Social Security. No, Social Security goes into a fund which is used to fund other things until. So it's a system, man. It's a system of wealth that is created and generated. You're talking about economics because if you talk about $1, the value of $1 opposed to the buying power, and when it comes to taxes and interest rates and